Green Gorilla beat. The content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. What's good, everybody? I'm GG. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chasers. So, before I get things started, I want to give a shout out to all of the members of the Green Gorilla channel, like I always do. So let's start that process and move on to the proceedings this evening. I want to give a shout out to Mark Swift, Show Me, Black Dog, Odd Collar, The Face, Craig, Raphael Brown, Omni Americana, Deanne, Donald Watts, Barry Little, Ryan Jackson, HipHop.catv, Coach DC, The Remedy, Kashif Caldwell, Infamous Chillin', I Am Black Man, John Reeves Too Much, Nichita, True King 337, B Hillfire, Forrest Windu, Mr. Blue Collar, Barnolas, Kyle J. Sura, I'm Just Jules, The Book of Ronin, Ab Media 83, Damon Harris, Brian McMurray, Mr. Lou Meth, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Shop Talk Live, Mr. Heat, Afro Analyst, NEU, Ronan Martin, Isa Abdul Zahir, Sir Anthony, Deshaun Nolly, MLR, Charles Rogers, Universal 178, Black's Word 404, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, See Truth the Revelator, Gold Professor, The Nameless Protagonist, Black Pill Ned Stark, Arthur Unknown, Dr. Siasan Johnson, Brian Williams, Kalonja Collar, Richard Martin, Ricky Dawson, Cedric Bowman, True 7360, BK Born Shahid, James Washington, Hostile Adept, Seven Coast Dojo, W Pure One, Roguish the Billmonger, I Care, BGS Ibmore, Marvin Battle Jr., Kwaku 217, S. Haywood, Dragon 59, Supreme Ibmore, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, NEU Again, Momal, William Ruffin, and Asangwa. Thank y'all for being members of the Green Gorilla channel. Y'all, as you always do, deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much for being members of the Green Gorilla channel. Thank y'all. I appreciate all your help and your support. And, you know, I apologize for yesterday because yesterday I just so happened to start a live stream accidentally, and I apologize for that. I didn't even know it was occurring, and so I was streaming and I had no intention of doing so, but I was trying to set up a program called Touch Portal, which I could use my iPad to trigger scenes in OBS. And anyway, man, it was a big I ended up deleting the program because it was doing things that were strange to OBS. OBS started crashing and all kind of crazy stuff. So I just said, man, you know what? I'm gonna go manual. But anyway, I apologize for that. I want to shout out to all the people in the chat right now. Crushing the Game Films, Mark Parker, A Sower of Seed, Very Little, Off Code, PK Angel, what's good? Ab Media, what's good? Shanga Zulu, what's good? And, you know, I'm going off the beaten path tonight and maybe a few more nights. And we're going to have a conversation about ethics. And it's not going to be sensational or, you know, exciting and titillating or anything like that. But I think the men in this space could benefit from it because I've heard several conversations about ethical matters and about morality in general, and I think that the men in the space would find this information useful, and hopefully they will utilize it in the context of the arguments that they make when they come into contact with the information. So, you know, it's information that you would get in any college class related to the subject matter of ethics. And I've taught it on many different occasions. I mean, I've taught ethics in over 50, 60 instances, you know, so I've taught it quite a lot. And I just think we need to be able to employ these concepts in the conversations that we have. Because I think some of the reasoning that we're doing is, I mean, not to be disrespectful, but it's a little sloppy. So if I give you the information, hopefully it will enable you to sharpen your toolkit. That's it. And to the brother who requested that I do a video on Stoicism, I am going to do it, but I don't want to do it without giving it justice. So give me the weekend to actually prepare it and to get it the way I want to have it, so that when I do present Stoicism, it's not just thrown together. It's something that's orchestrated and something that I've thought and pondered over for a little while. So at any rate, that's all. So no news today, no hip hop rundown, no Black history, none of that. We just gonna get into this because it's gonna take a little bit of time for me to get through it. And hopefully you'll find it useful. If you don't, okay, well, just discard it. But Don't say I didn't try to give it to you. This information would be, like at least about $35,000 to $5,000 that a student would pay for in the course of taking a course. So I'm giving it to you for free. So let's get to it, man. And hopefully, again, it'll prove useful to you. So I just want to go straight to it. So I'm going to do just that. You're going to hear the music cease. And let's get right to it. All right. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the subject matter of ethical relativism. All right. Now, the reason I want to start here is because this is typically how these kind of courses are taught. You kind of start off with ethical relativism and then you move into the other areas of ethics. So that's what I want to do. And let's just get right into it. So what is this stream going to be about? Well, it's going to discuss, again, the subject matter of ethical relativism. And it's used as an introductory issue to the question of moral differences in general. And it's going to lead to a conversation about anthropology and the idea that morality is basically acculturation. Then we're going to move from there to question the concept of relativity or relativism itself. And then we're going to contrast that with the idea of soft universalism and hard universalism. And then in the end, we're going to discuss multiculturalism, because ethical relativism lends itself to the concept of multiculturalism. And we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of multiculturalism. Now, in the context of a presentation like this, I usually would have audio and video images to use in conjunction with what I'm about to say. But since I don't have the capacity to do that without potentially incurring a copyright strike, I'm just going to leave out the audio and the video. All right. And explain to you the best I can these abstract concepts. That's the best I can do right now. All right. So without further ado, let's just get right into it, man. Now, I'm just going to tell you, there's only so many ways that you can deal with moral differences. And I've said to many men in this space before, there's only really 4 ways to approach moral differences. That's it. I mean, in every other articulation about moral differences are variations on these main themes. That's just what it is. So already you're taking something that's seemingly complex beyond measure, and you're simplifying it by restricting it to 4 different kinds of approaches. Now, I will say that the first approach is comprised of 3 subparts. You got moral nihilism, moral skepticism, and moral subjectivism. On the second score, you have ethical relativism, which is what we're going to focus on primarily, okay? There's soft universalism. We'll focus on that a little bit. And then hard universalism, which is also called moral or ethical absolutism. At some point, I'm going to talk about hard universalism, because you'll see why in a second, but I can't do that all tonight. It would require way too much. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is look at these theories and determine whether or not they hold up their weight with salt according to their ability to solve problems related to moral differences. Look, there are moral differences in the culture in which we live. That's just par for the course. We live in a pluralistic society, different people from different races, different people with different religious backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds. You're going to have differences in opinion about what's right and what is wrong. Now, how do you begin to solve problems related to a group of people in a culture where there's pluralism, meaning that there are a plethora of different kind of religious, ethnic, racial, and moral backgrounds. How do you even begin to solve those kind of problems? Okay. Now, let's talk about the first approach, which is comprised of the three subparts. So, what is moral nihilism? I've heard this referred to lately, not by expressly using the term moral nihilism, but I've heard it referred to lately, right? And ultimately, the concept means there is no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong viewpoint as it pertains to morality, because there actually is no such thing as right or wrong in and of itself. There are a lot of people who use this talking point. Over and over and over again, I hear people bring this up in this space and other spaces, but the problem with it is that it's hard to defend. It's counterintuitive, because in this space, it just behooves me to talk about it. I mean, because how is it possible that this space, which I consider to be in and of itself a space that's directed towards determining what's right and wrong, what's fair, unfair, what's just and unjust, associated with black men? So then when you make a reference to moral nihilism, I just can't really, I don't understand it. But yet it's been done, and I've seen it done outside of the context of the black manosphere as well. But whatever the case may be, it's terrible at dealing with the fact that people actually make moral judgments all day, every damn day. They say something's right or something's wrong. I like something. I don't like something. That was just. That was unjust. We do this all the time. And we don't think that we're doing anything wrong when we do it. And I'm not talking about wrong morally. I'm talking about wrong in the sense of its correspondence to the truth. This is all we do. So I don't understand how you can be a nihilist, but at the same time make moral judgments consistently. But that's just my opinion. All right. So moral nihilism, there is no morality. There's no moral code, no moral truth whatsoever. It's whatever the fuck goes. Okay. I was going to show a video. This is a video about Charles Blow, and he's making an indictment against Donald Trump. He's calling him a bigot. He's calling him a misogynist. He's calling him an ableist, because at one point, the video would have pointed out the time in which Donald Trump acted like he was someone afflicted with cerebral palsy, and he was making fun of a reporter, which, is fucked up, but I found it quite funny when he did it. I mean, it's hilarious to me. But anyway, not to take anything away from people who have a disability or anything like that, but it was funny to me. Okay. But Charles Blow is upset about it, and was upset about it. And he went on a tirade. He went on a rant about Trump and the people who support him, whether they be black, white, red, brown, yellow, whatever. Okay. So that's what this video was going to discuss or illustrate. All right. And people have arguments against what he said. So, but people make judgments all the time. Okay. Now, the next viewpoint is called moral skepticism. And this viewpoint basically says, if there is right or wrong, we don't know what it is. We can't know it because we're not in an epistemic position to actually know it. We don't have the capacity to know what right or wrong is. So instead of saying that we know, we reserve our judgment. We don't say anything at all. We doubt whether or not there is something that is absolutely right or wrong. Okay? And I had a video to show about this. You know, there was the guy that had a movie, a few actors in a movie, and they were having a conversation about morality, whether what he did was right or wrong. And he was like, you know, the hell if I know. I just know I was satisfied by it. So can't use it because I don't want to incur a community strike. I've already got one, so I don't want another one. But the last horn of the first approach is moral subjectivism, right? And I hear this often as well. And this viewpoint is that moral judgments and viewpoints are just interstates in an individual, which can't be compared to the interstates of another individual. So if this is the case, the content of your moral viewpoints are no more important and hold no more weight than that of another person's. No matter your experiences or no matter your honor or, you know, your status within the culture that you live in. So anybody's viewpoint is just as valid as anybody else's viewpoint, and you can't compare and contrast different people's viewpoints. No need to even engage in a conversation about it. What's right for that person is right for them. What's right for you is right for you. Okay? So that's about the end of those views, right? That first approach to ethical or solving moral differences, right? Now, what this means is, especially as it pertains to moral subjectivism, right, that abortion or pro-life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're pro-life, you're pro-abortion, don't matter. You can't make a claim about it, about anyone, or to try to tell someone that they ought not do it. It just is what it is. It's no more different than somebody telling you that Coke is better than Pepsi. It doesn't matter. And you can't tell me, I know for a fact, when it comes to aesthetic judgments, it's usually difficult for you to justify rationally why something is better than something else. Like, if you like Coca-Cola, who am I to tell you that Pepsi is better? If that's what you like. So it puts it in the realm of nothing but a matter of personal taste or personal opinion. All right? Now, it should be readily apparent to you that this is problematic, just right off the bat. It should be. Because when you hold these kind of positions, whether it's a nihilist position, whether it's a skepticist position, or whether it's a subjectivist position, you are not capable of solving conflicts related to moral problems. If one viewpoint is no more right or wrong than another, if there is no morality whatsoever at all, or if you claim that it's not possible for you to actually determine what's right or wrong, then what are you engaged in arguments with other people about what's right and wrong for? It's no use. You may as well not even have a conversation to begin with. And that's just it. Okay? So those are the first three approaches to moral problem solving or resolving moral differences. The one is just don't even try to solve the moral differences at all. Just refer back to one of those three viewpoints. We don't know what it is. Okay, well, all right, I'm not going to argue with you then. No use in having a conversation. If you're a nihilist, no use in having a conversation either. If you're a subjectivist, still no need to have a conversation because we're not going to get anywhere. All we're going to do is spin our wheels and go around in circles. All right. This brings us to the next issue, which is ethical relativism. All right. Now, ethical relativism is similar to moral subjectivism, but it's a little bit different. Whereas moral subjectivism applies to individuals and inner states, psychological states within the individual, ethical relativism is something that applies to entire cultures. Okay? And it asserts that there is no such thing as universal truth as it pertains to moral matters. Every culture has its own set rules, values, traditions, and prescripts that work for it and that are valid for it. But it also asserts this viewpoint that we have no right to interfere with the rules and customs of different people from different cultures. Again, you don't have the right to criticize people from another culture about their social practices, their habits, and their traditions. You can't do it. Okay? Now, one could argue this is beneficial to some degree because it's positive because it discourages cultural imperialism. And cultural imperialism is a form of oppression. Okay? That asserts that your culture is better than another person's, or that it's more enlightened, or that you're more civilized than another group of people. Okay? So one could argue, okay, well, this is positive in that light. Okay? But the problem with it is it's lousy when it comes to solving problems related to intercultural moral disagreement. It's just lousy. It doesn't do the work. Now, people say this, well, that's what they do over there. When you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. When you're in America, you do as Americans do. You're in the black community, you do what black people do. You're in the white community, you do what white folks do. Okay? Now, the question is, well, what happens when it comes to intercultural disagreement? What do you do? Okay? Now, I want to say that there's another viewpoint, but I'm going to get back to ethical relativism because we're not done yet. But I do want to just gloss over soft universalism and hard universalism real quick. Okay? Now, soft universalism is a view that basically says it looks like there are a lot of differences among cultures. However, there is a basic set of tenets and creeds or principles that every culture agrees upon. One of them is you can't just kill people indiscriminately. Now, I mean, there are many reasons to justify killing someone, but killing them indiscriminately is just morally problematic. Haphazardly and wantonly and randomly hurting people such that you're taking their life away, that's wrong. Okay? Another one is lying, especially if you don't even have a reason to lie. Now, I don't want to get into the subtleties of when it's acceptable or unacceptable to lie, but typically, if you have no reason to lie, you should not do it. And most people would agree with this. Okay? And also, most cultures that you come into contact with, predominantly, theft and stealing is not allowed. It's looked down upon. It's something that's shamed. Okay? So those are the three areas where people from all cultures are pretty much in universal agreement. Right? And some people say and put forth the idea that this idea, this soft universalist idea, is rooted in our biology, and that morality stems from the way that we're physically structured. Okay? And that we all, because we're all somewhat, physically constituted in the same way, we all, to some degree, share the same set of moral principles. And that's because of our nature, our human nature. Right? Now, some people point out that soft universalism is often hidden. You can't really actually see it because of this concept called acculturation. Now, what's acculturation? Acculturation is where you got different cultures and they have the same moral sentiments, but they apply the way that those sentiments are expressed. So you there's disgust in every culture. There's praise in every culture. There's blame in every culture, but the way in which these sentiments are expressed are going to vary. But the sentiment is the same. Disgust is the same. Praise is the same in terms of feeling or sentiment, right? And punishment or reward, acceptance, and so on and so forth, they're going to be expressed in different kinds of ways. Now, what's the pro to soft universalism? Well, in terms of solving moral conflicts, it's positive because it looks for a common ground. It starts with the idea that there is room for being able to solve a moral problem. Okay? Even where there is a variety of different opinions about what is right and what is wrong. So at least it starts with the idea that essentially we share things in common morally, and it builds from there. All right? But the last view or the last approach is hard universalism. And I said I wasn't going to go all the way into it, but I got to cover it briefly just to give you an adumbration or outline. So hard universalism says there's one universal moral code and that there is no legitimacy to the idea that two moral codes can exist simultaneously. Now, I'm here to tell you, this is the main approach taken up by philosophers when they develop their moral theories or ethical theories. Okay? This is the way philosophers do moral thinking. They typically are engaged in what is called also moral absolutism. So you think you figured it out? You think you got the answers? Okay. You got the right moral code? Then it's your duty to try to explain that to other people. And you use reasoning, you use arguments, and you use demonstration. Sometimes you use evidence to try to make your point clear and to try to get people to accept the way that you understand morality. Okay? So those are the four approaches. It don't get no more complex than that. It's not, I mean, this is it. All right? Now, of course, a few things can lead to disagreement about a whole lot. So he says, off code, I'm looking at the joint now. Can you play music low in the background while the video plays, GG? I could. I didn't plan on doing that, but I could do that real easily. So, but I don't want to have any trap music or anything like that going on in the background. Let me put on something that's real smooth. If I can find something. I don't want to have nothing that's going to put people to sleep though either. Tell you what. I'll put on some let me see, what kind of music do I want to put on this joint, man? I'll put that on. It's some hip hop music, but I'll turn it down real low. That's not the music I want though. Hold on, let me do something different than that, man. That's not the music I want, man. It's not something I want to do, man. Let me put this music on, man.
Green Gorilla beat.
Turn it all the way down, man. All right, so hopefully that's good enough for you, man. Hopefully you could hear me and that everything is coming through and you got some music. You got a little background music. So anyway, that's what hard universalism is, okay? Now I got to figure out where I was so I can get back to my little presentation. Okay. Now, I want you to know this, okay? When it pertains to cultural relativism and ethical relativism, you got to understand the distinction between those, okay? So, cultural relativism is a descriptive theory. But ethical relativism is a normative theory. Now, what's the difference between description and prescription? It's just that. A descriptive theory just explains how things are. It's an empirical argument about the way the world actually is. But a normative theory is a theory that has moral or ethical value attached to it. So when you say something is a certain way, you're describing it and just saying, as a matter of fact, it is that way. However, a normative theory is dealing with what ought to be, how things should be. So there's a difference there. A lot of people, I don't understand why they don't get this. I don't understand why they can't make the distinction, but they just fail to do it. Cultural relativism and ethical relativism are not the same. They're not. Now, it is true that different cultures possess different mores. They have different customs and they have different values. But that doesn't mean that they ought to, or that they should. That's ethical relativism. So ethical relativism is a normative theory. It means something ought to be a certain kind of way. So it basically says there is no universal moral code, and each culture's codes are right and valid for it. That's what it says. That's what it asserts and puts forward. Okay? Now, we'll get back to it later, but I want to explain to you that one of the main proponents of ethical relativism is a woman by the name of Ruth Benedict. Okay? A lot of people attribute ethical relativism to her. Okay? She's an American anthropologist and she defended ethical relativism. Okay? It's just important that you should know that. Okay? And what she says is this, and a lot of people get lost here. I don't know why, but she says what's normal is a variant of the concept of the good. And that's her own words. The concept of normal is a variant of the concept of the good. And what that basically means is, if a society approves of something, that means that it's normal for them. Okay? And it's also important for you to know that, okay, if something is abnormal, it doesn't mean it's unthinkable. It just means that it's unusual. Okay? Now, what's normal here in America? I'd like to ask you, I want some input from you. What do you consider to be abnormal? What do you consider to be abnormal about our culture? Because you got to think that something's abnormal. But just think about it for a minute. I don't want to delay too long. But there's some things that are abnormal to us. Not necessarily unthinkable, but it's abnormal, and therefore we don't consider it to be ethical. We don't consider it to be right. It's not fair, or it's not just. It's not appropriate. Okay? So, but what you think is good is what you think is normal. Or what you think is normal, you think is good. Say, for example, heterosexuality. That's normal for people in this culture, although some people say it's becoming more and more attacked because, there are a certain group of people in the LGBTQ community, they call it heteronormativity. The idea that people ought to be straight is oppressive. I don't agree with that. In this culture, maybe that happened in the past, but that's definitely not something that's happening now, right? But what's abnormal? What is abnormal in this culture? Gang culture. Gang culture is abnormal. But is it? Is gang culture abnormal? Or is it the norm? I would assert this, that throughout most of human history, people have lived in gangs or bands, and that it always will be this way. Now, I'm describing something, right? So you say gang culture is abnormal. So men banding together to fight against other groups of men who are in opposition to them, that's abnormal? Is it? Are nation states who have armies, navies, and air forces, and they fight against each other, is that abnormal? Or is that normal? I don't know. A lot of times we make claims without thinking them through. Like, one can argue you'll never be able to get rid of gang culture because you'll never be able to get rid of conflict among men. Or anybody, or people, any people for that matter, whether it be male or female. You'll never be able to get rid of conflict. So how do you settle it? It's nice to say, oh, well, you know, the gangs are destroying the community. Really? What about the internecine warfare among Europeans? The Brits, the Gauls, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, the Danes, the Swedes. What makes it acceptable macroscopically, but it's unacceptable microscopically? It's just something to think about. I'm not telling you one way or the other, but I'm just giving you some examples, okay? So anyway, just think about it. What's normal? All she's asserting here is that if something is normal for a culture, they perceive it as good. And so what I would normally ask my students something is, you know, is gay marriage normal or abnormal? Is it acceptable or unacceptable in American culture? That's typically a question I would ask. Is it normal or abnormal? And if it's normal, when did it become normal? If it's abnormal, why do you think it's abnormal? So those are some questions I would ask some students, okay? So anyway, to make this point about this something being abnormal doesn't mean it's unthinkable. Take, for example, the Northwest Coast Indians. This is, again, an example that's used in ethical theory all the time. So this group of Indians would kill innocent people in retaliation for a natural disaster or an accidental death. So let's say, for example, lightning strikes and it kills somebody, or somebody gets drowned in a river, they slip and fall or something like that. Or, you know, something happens and they die accidentally. These people want retaliation for that. So what they'll do is they'll go find somebody else and kill them. Is that normal or abnormal? And I'm gonna wait for an answer to this. I'm gonna wait for the answer to this. Is the example of the Northwest Coast Indians killing people who had nothing to do with the accidental or the natural death of a group of a person, is that normal or abnormal? I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna hit my vape stick and wait on that shit. It's one thing, talk about gang culture, it's one thing to go get somebody that killed your boy. It's another thing to go kill a rival gang because, damn, your boy got hit in a car accident. He got killed in a car accident. One can argue that's just absolutely abnormal. Just ridiculously abnormal. I got a bunch of little hits coming in because memberships being renewed. Just don't pay it any attention. So Mr. Blue Collar, not Mr. Blue Collar, but Rollers the Bill Monger said that sounds ludicrous. Barry Little says it's abnormal. Okay, T Fitness for You said America did it to the Iraqis after September 11th. I think you're right about that. Shango Zulu said it's normal. So it's normal for you to go kill somebody because your daughter died from a natural accident. She got cancer. It's time to go kill somebody. Off code said abnormal. Hella AB. Hella abnormal, Roguish the Bill Monger say. Well, it just so happens it's not unthinkable. Let me give you some examples. You ever heard of going postal on a motherfucker? You heard of that before, right? Somebody going postal. He lost his job. Something happened to him. So, fuck it. No, ain't nobody gonna have, nobody's gonna live then. If my life is fucked up, everybody's life's gonna be fucked up. You ever heard of it? I'm sure you have. And I'm pretty sure that you felt this way to some degree at some point or the other. To the point where if something's fucked up for you, everybody's gonna feel it. Just keeping it real. We don't like to keep it real a lot. Murder, suicide happens quite often. Their life's fucked up. They're going to take some people out with them. Not unthinkable. Might be abnormal. Because we don't consider it to be normal, but it's not unthinkable. Or, as T-Fitness for You said, bombing of Iraq after 9/11. Like, what did Iraq have to do with 9/11? What did it have to do with Iraq? Absolutely nothing. I remember asking this question to myself when I heard them, they just basically in Congress, and I was watching C-SPAN, and the arguments they were making about terrorists and how closely they came to asserting that, well, everybody in the Middle East is a terrorist or a potential terrorist. And I saw them make this intellectual leap to, okay, well, we got to let somebody know that this was fucked up. So they just reached out and punched anybody. That's how I feel about it. Or they used it as an excuse to go over and take something from somebody else, to strip their resources away. That's how I perceive it, right? And then here's another example. You ever took out some bullshit on your girlfriend, or if you were a woman here, your boyfriend, because you had a bad day? Oh, don't worry about me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I'm just having a bad day. So it's not unthinkable. It's not. All right? So moving on to the next subject. So what's the goal of ethical relativism? One can argue the goal is not to have a mutual understanding with different people from different cultures. That would require your ability to know the reasoning behind the normality of their social practices, right? But the goal is to not interfere. That's the goal of ethical relativism. Don't interfere with the practices of other cultures. Because who are you? What right do you have to interfere? So one could argue it breeds tolerance for other cultures and their social practices and their moral prescriptions. But then this begs the question. It begs the question, right? How do you accept some things? Is tolerance all that you need? We ought to tolerate other people from other cultures and the things that they do, right? Okay, so what about caning? We should accept that. Corporal punishment, Just fuck it. Just start hitting motherfuckers. Why not? That's cool. It's just good just to start slapping people around when they do shit that we don't like. What about that? What about female genital mutilation? It's cool, man. Cut her fucking clitoris off, man. No pleasure for her, man. That's cool. We should just tolerate it. Now, one can argue, okay, those are kind of sketchy. Who are we to say that these tribes that practice female genital mutilation have to be intervened upon in order to prevent them from doing what they've been doing for thousands of years? Even when it comes to caning, you can say, well, if they commit a crime, then they knew what to expect. So that's okay. I mean, one could make that case. But damn, what about child labor, man? Is it okay to put kids to work? Is it okay to put kids to work? Should we tolerate that? Having kids perform menial, hard, and menial labor? Or what about genocide? Should we sit back and say, well, hey, it's their culture, it's cool for them to practice genocide. That's just them. That's the way they have their culture arranged. There's nothing wrong with it. Or if we think there's something wrong with it, we have no right to interfere. Is that right? Or what about infanticide? Oh, yeah, they just kill their babies. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's cool. That's perfectly morally permissible for them. So we don't have to intervene or do anything about it. Who are we to judge? That's cool. I just want to know what you think. It's okay, right? Perfectly morally permissible for them. No, we have no right to interfere. Why cannibalism. I see Cat Scratch Coder. Cannibalism. No, it can't interfere. That's just their cultural practices. Or what's another good one? Slavery? Child prostitution? Oh, can't interfere. It's not our culture. So, I mean, you get the point, right? So I always ask the students that, in the courses that I teach, especially a course like ethics, like, okay, what are the top 3 most pressing problems of our time? Because I know everybody thinks that there are moral problems in their own culture. What are the top 3 problems that you have with the culture in which you live? And then the next question I ask them is, do you have a responsibility to help solve the moral problem? And if you answer yes to that question, what will you do to actually solve it? Or will you just go about your business and say, it's another person's responsibility to solve it, not mine? And if so, if you think that way, what is your moral argument for making that case? What is your justification for making that be the case? Because I've heard this said quite often, especially as it pertains to dealing with these kids. So I've heard this argument verbatim in this space. Well, black men got a problem with dealing with boys that they didn't give birth to because only 15% of the men are actually having babies, and 50% don't have any children at all, and like 35% of men are married. So when it comes to dealing with the boys, nobody has any responsibility to it at all. It's nobody has any, but you want a strong black nation though. How do you contend with these issues? That's what I'm asking, right? So if there's a moral problem, do you have a responsibility to solve it? If you consider it to be a moral problem, and if you think so that it is your responsibility, what are you going to do? What do you do? Just nothing? Just chill, huh? Just chill. So here's some things to consider, right? Just going back over what I covered thus far, and I'm not done yet. But anyway, if you're a moral nihilist, if you're a moral subjectivist, or you're a skepticist, just be quiet, man. Don't make any moral judgments at all. Just be quiet and deal with the world the way it is. Whatever people do to you or to others, don't have any moral judgment. Don't react to it, because it's not for you to react. If you're a nihilist, a subjectivist, or a skepticist, you need to shut your trap, man. Be quiet. There's no room for you to make any judgments. Just accept things the way that they are. Now, if you end up adopting ethical relativism, what you need not do is make judgments outside of the context of your own culture. Now, that goes both ways. It goes good and bad. You can't even adopt what you think to be or consider to be good about another culture, because it's not yours. You don't understand it. It's not part of your lifestyle. So you shouldn't even embrace the value systems of other people from other cultures, let alone tell them what to do. So those are some things to consider. Now, going back to ethical relativism and to cap it up, no such thing as a universal truth. Each culture has its own set of rules and customs that work for and that are valid for it. You have no right to interfere with their rules and with their customs and with their traditions. But this brings us to the next subject. There are problems with this viewpoint. And I'm going to list them. It's about 6 problems with it. The first one I've already told you. It precludes your ability to learn from these other cultures. You can't praise or blame them. You can't judge or assess their rituals or their practices. So if you're a relativist, I've even heard it said in the same conversation that, okay, these people do this better than we do. We need to model our system after their system. But at the same time, they'll push forth the idea of ethical relativism. And I'm left scratching my head thinking to myself, like, how is it possible that you could be a relativist, but then you go out and you praise and blame them for what they do and how they carry on their own cultural practices? I don't understand it. But I don't say anything. I just sit back and I say, well, you know, it is what it is. I'm going to let that conversation be what it is. I'm not going to intervene. I'm going to play like an ethical relativist and not get involved. Another problem with it is, if you're an ethical relativist, you only acknowledge majority rule when it comes to what is actually normal within the context of your own culture. So you can't have a critical stance towards accepted cultural practices within your own culture. But this is problematic because I can guarantee you, this is just a descriptive fact about human nature and humans' participation in civilizational situations, man. There's no 100% agreement on anything related to what's normal. It never has been and never will be. Okay? Not only that, are you talking about the actual or the professed morality of a group? Because a lot of people can fix their mouths to say anything about what their code is, what their cultural practices are, or what they subscribe to ethically. But are we talking about what they say, or are we talking about what they're doing? Because what people say and what they do, it could be two wild, diametrically opposed things. Are you talking about fidelity and partnerships? Because there's a lot of cheating going on, but we profess it. Fidelity. But we live in a thought culture. What about drug use? Everybody says no to drugs and takes a stand. Then after the show, they go looking for the dope man. After the show, they go looking for the dope man. What about pornography? Oh, you know, that's something nobody does, right? Jacking off and shit like that. But America is among the largest nation that consumes pornography. So are you talking about the actual or the professed morality of a specific culture? What is it? You doing what they, are you looking at what they do, or are you looking at what they say their norms are? Another problem with it is to figure out exactly what the majority is within the context of a culture. Because I can tell you this, at one time, something could be perfectly acceptable, and then 50 years later, it's absolutely unacceptable. Or it can be unacceptable to begin with, and then it actually becomes the norm. Like 100 years ago, out of wedlock births would be considered to be whorish and unacceptable. But today, it's par for the course. It's normalized. So what are you talking about? What's the majority? Then it's also, you know, a problem related to geography. Like, where is the majority to be located? Is it supposed to be like the majority of people in the entire country? Or are you talking about states? You're talking about municipalities? Are you talking about counties within municipalities? Like, what majority are you talking about? Where is it? And not only is it a problem based on geography, but what is a culture? You ever stop to think about what constitutes a culture? A lot of people throw the word around a whole lot. But what is it? Is it a geographical location? Is it an ethnic group? Is it a religious group? Is it a race? Is it a family or a group or a set of family relations? Like, what is it? What is a culture? And how do you know you're dealing with one? Right? And then what about subgroups within cultures? How do you deal with that issue? And then lastly is I think the death nail to ethical relativism, if you ask me, but you know, that's my opinion. Okay, I'm letting you know that this is my opinion. I'm not going to sit here and act like I got all the understanding worked out and that I have the final say on the matter. But I think this issue's the death nail from a logical perspective. Tolerance can't be a universal value, according to ethical relativism. According to the logic of ethical relativism itself. Because what if my cultural practice is to actually be intolerant? What if I'm a Nazi? What if I'm a member of the Klan? I don't have to tolerate you. It's my culture. If I'm a white supremacist in a white supremacist culture and ethical relativism is the order of the day, then who am I to say that's wrong if I'm an ethical relativist? I have no grounds to make any claim against it. So those are problems related to ethical relativism. Okay. Anyway, I'm trying to give you this game so that when you make these conversations, you know exactly what it is that you're actually saying and the implications of what it is that you're saying and the ideas that you're articulating. Again, this is not going to be titillating and exciting. This is actual thinking about ethical matters in the abstract. A lot of guys here, man, love to talk about ethical issues without the aid of abstract thought to guide them along the process. And then the waters gets muddy. It gets muddy because there's no focus and there's no structure to it. And this is why, half the time I don't get involved in the conversations. I need to start interjecting myself into the conversations, but I don't do it precisely because I'm like, well, I don't want to offend these guys. But some of the shit that they're saying, it's contradictory from one thing to the next. But that's why I stay out a lot. That's why I stay out a lot. So, yeah, if you put a lot of caps in the comments, the bot will automatically it'll reject your comment. So I see Afro Troop says that what if the brothers form our own clan? I mean, but we don't like gang activity. That's dysfunctional. Very little. Thank you for your contribution. We don't like gang culture. We don't like the idea of men banding together and fighting against other men. I'm going to tell you this. This is a historical fact. You don't get a united group of people ready to perform military action right off the bat by fiat. What you first have are small enclaves of or tribal internecine warfare occurring amongst people, and then some strong leader comes along and unites them. That's how that shit goes. It doesn't go the other way around, where you got a group of people who have no idea about how to do anything militarily, and all of a sudden they become a group of people who are ready to fight. It never works that way. Unless those people are extremely oppressed. And then they're only reacting. They're not acting in a concerted fashion. But typically that's how it happened. That's how it happened in the Saracen world or the Arabic world. These people were fighting with each other, and then you get Muhammad and they get united. You take various factions and you unite them. That's how that happens. But I'm telling you, that's my opinion. That's my viewpoint. Okay. So those are the problems with ethical relativism. All right. Let's go to soft universalism. Okay. Again, this is the viewpoint that all cultures have at least some values in common, even if they express those common values in different kinds of ways. Now, I'll tell you that in the Western world, one of the philosophical figures that kind of undergirds the idea of soft universalism is David Hume. I don't know if you've ever heard of David Hume. To be quite honest, I like David Hume, even though I don't like his racial thought, because he was a racist. But I mean, most guys who did philosophy in the Western tradition, or, especially from the Enlightenment on, they're straight up racist, man. Just is what it is. Okay. Now, what he says is that all morality is grounded in human sentiments, but particularly the sentiment of compassion. And he says that you can find this sentiment. It's the same in every human being, even though it's different in its expression for different persons and cultures. Some people hug people when they have compassion for them. Some people give money to people when they have compassion for them. But the sentiment is the same. And he argues that morality in and of itself is undergirded, kind of grounded in this sentiment of compassion or empathy, if you want to call it that. Now, to some degree, I tend to agree with David Hume. I'm just to let you know my viewpoint. I am a soft universalist. I am. If I had to pick one of these ways of approaching moral problem solving, I'm going to opt for the soft universalist position and say all human beings are, for the most part, constituted physically in the same way. We experience the same range of emotions, and we share the same kind of nervous system, which evokes the same kind of, you can call it vibrations, you can call it sentiments, you can call it, inner states, whatever you want to call it. Human beings have neurons. But not only do we have neurons, we have mirror neurons. So, for example, if you yawn in my presence, shit, I might yawn. If I see you laugh, I'm gonna start smiling myself and like try to figure out what's funny, man. Like what's going on? If you see a group of people all of a sudden running and hauling ass in one direction, if you stay still, you're probably gonna end up fucking dead. So I'm a naturalist. So this is why I'm more leaning towards accepting soft universalism. But that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. Okay? And I'm letting it be known that that's my opinion. Not saying it's the gospel, because you can have a different view. But I'm ready to argue with you the relative merits of whatever position that you have. Okay? Now, he's not the only person. I mean, he's the architect, one could argue, of the soft universalist position. But there are other people who think just like him. There's a philosopher by the name of James Rachels. He's now deceased. He argues that, look, there's 3 universal values. And I said this earlier on, but this is a little bit of a modification of it. No indiscriminate killing. But he qualifies it and says, look, in every culture, there's an express moral imperative to ensure that all children, especially infants, are cared enough for so that the society can sustain itself. You have that at least. Okay? You got the prohibition of lying, especially, when it's unnecessary. And then you got the prohibition of murder. For the most part, this happens in all cultures. And then you might say, well, what about the Northwest Coast Indian example? Where they didn't think they were actually murdering someone indiscriminately. They thought that they were actually righting a wrong. Might be abnormal to us. But then again, there are cognates and similarities between some of the practices that we perform in our day-to-day lives and that of the Northwest Coast Indians. If you look hard and close enough. It's just it is what it is. But there are problems with soft universalism. There's problems with every theory that exists. There are people who can critique it from different ways. Okay? So what's the problem with soft universalism? Well, not all cultures have decided to keep themselves going. For example, the Shakers. I don't know if you ever heard of those guys. Not the Quakers, but the Shakers. These are people who have decided to live a life of chastity and celibacy. They don't believe in having sex. I mean, they aren't around anymore, are they? But the whole point, not all cultures have decided to keep themselves going. So you have examples, counter examples to the claim that all cultures prescribe to a set of universal or common moral values. Okay? And then not only that, not all cultures follow rules 2 and 3, which are related to the subject matter of lying and murder. Nobody follows these rules wholeheartedly. And the rules may be advanced on an intracultural level, but they're definitely not advanced on an intercultural level. These are the facts. America lies all day. Well, I'm not going to get into that route. I was about to go down a route that I don't think will be beneficial at the current moment. But not all cultures follow those rules. Okay? So there are even problems with soft universalism, even though I kind of tend to lean in that direction. All right? So Rachel's may be wrong in describing the rules to which all cultures actually abide. But it doesn't stop me from being able to say, right? So that's what we call descriptive soft universalism. You're describing the way things are. He may be erroneous, but one could argue normatively that people ought to aspire to not lie, to not murder, and to care enough for infants to keep the society going. At least we can say that ought to be the case, right? So again, you're seeing differences in between description and prescription, normativity and merely describing something, okay? You're being made aware of that. Now, ethics, of course, is a normative enterprise. It's saying that things ought to be a specific kind of way. But it just so happens that the kind of normative thinking that I employ is going to be embedded in some relation, is going to have to bear some relation to the facts. Because I think that, prescribing and engaging in normative speculation is futile without at least having some understanding of the facts about human nature. But that's just my opinion. It's my opinion. Now we get into the issue of multiculturalism or cultural diversity. Now, typically when I would do this, America's supposed to be this great big melting pot, or at least that's how it's referred to, right? You got people who come from all over the world and they merge and boil down to one cultural flavor. Now, the question is this a good idea or not? And I'm going to look at the chat real quick. Let me go to the chat scene, see what's popping off there. I haven't been looking at y'all and figuring out what y'all been saying for quite a bit of time. Looking at the, y'all can, I don't know why I put this chat scene together anyway, because y'all can see what's going on in the chat, because y'all watching from YouTube land. Sir Anthony, are you really Quaker, bruh? People confuse us with Shakers all the time. Where do you stand? He says, you are absolutely right, but if folks still believe in it, which they do, you get sad situations like what's happening now in China at the Watts Institute where it's marrying genetic engineering. I don't know what conversation that is, man. Y'all on that one. But anyway, I'm trying to give you this, and this is only the beginning. I can't give you all of this in one sitting. But is the melting pot ideal a good one? Because a lot of guys right now are aspiring to blend in. That's the goal for some guys, to blend in. Is blending in the aspiration? Is this what we should be aiming for? The melting pot? Is it possible for black people to blend in to America? Some people say yes. Some people say no. Sir Anthony says, I struggle to wrap my head around much of this. That's why he's probably going to say that's why he hasn't responded. And look, you can ask me any questions about this, but I just want to get past this multiculturalism part. And then if you got any questions, you can ask it. And don't say you sitting in my feet, bruh. You're not sitting at my feet. I don't have fans. I got compatriots. I don't have fans. I got friends. I got gorillas. I don't have fans. I don't have fans. That's just me. I don't have no fans. So at any rate, Louis Cypher, okay, Lucifer, multiculturalism sucks. It doesn't, I guess he's just saying it doesn't last for long. It doesn't, not for long. Eugenics is good. Understood, respect, okay. But anyway, man, look, what I usually do is I show the Schoolhouse Rock video called The Great American Melting Pot. I don't know if you ever seen that, but I can't show it to you because I don't want to incur a copyright strike. So I'm gonna leave it alone. So I'm not gonna show it because I don't want to get that strike, but that's what I would usually show, okay? Now the question is it a good goal to reach for? That's what I've been asking you. Now the question is, does it lead to assimilation in a negative way, or does it lead to intolerance or to indifference? Because if the goal is to get everybody to assimilate, well, what if I don't want to assimilate? What if I want to maintain my own cultural flavor? What if I want to do things my way and not be cajoled into acting the way they say I ought to act? Why can't I maintain my own cultural flavor? Why not? Why do I have to become white or act white in order to be accepted by the predominant culture? Why? And the funny thing is, most people who do so, especially if they're black, they don't necessarily get accepted anyway. So there's a different idea, right? So here's this woman here, man. This is a video. I can't show it, but it's a video where there's this white woman and she's getting angry at a group of Latinos for speaking Spanish. And she ultimately comes out and says, "This is America. We speak English, not Spanish. It's not Spain." And the people, you know, who are speaking Spanish are saying, "Look, I'm not from Spain." And another thing people need to be aware of, like, I don't know why there's this hatred for Spanish, as if Spain is like non-European. Like, Spain is European, man. That's where Columbus came from, man. That's a white dude, man. He's not Latino in the sense in which we consider Latino people to be. And I don't know why people get this shit confused all the time. I just don't understand it. Spaniards are European people, man. Period. Most of these people who consider themselves to be Latinos, they speak a slave language, man. That's just the facts. But anyway, some people want you to assimilate. They're like, if you don't do it the way we say you ought to do it, then it can't be done. You shouldn't. Fuck Spanish. Don't speak that around me. And they get agitated and irritated by it. And they don't like it. Now, is this woman right for being upset that somebody's speaking a language that she doesn't understand? Or does she, does she need to be bitch slapped? I mean, you tell me. So anyway, man, some people say that, there are problems associated with the whole idea of the melting pot. Because people from Europe, they seem to be embraced, especially if they anglicize themselves, which means that, they adopt the practices of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and they start to comport like they do, and they change their names, and they begin to act like they do. But some people feel like they're left out. Do you feel left out as a black man? Or do you feel like you're uber capable of assimilating? So some people say that people who are non-white in America have been subjected to what's called Eurocentrism, which is a form of monoculturalism. Like a one way of being in the world, kind of like a universality about how things ought to be done and how people ought to behave and the way they ought to speak and the kind of social practices that they ought to engage in. So some people say we need to revisit this concept of multiculturalism, and we should take away the idea of the melting pot and replace it with the idea of a tossed salad. And no references to some shit that ain't necessary. But the melting pot idea should be replaced with the idea of a tossed salad. And so within that framework, you're able to maintain your own unique cultural flavor without being excluded or marginalized or boiled down into one flavor. So it's an embracement of diversity instead of an exclusion of and an aversion for diversity. And the last slide I got, man, is about exclusive multiculturalism. So there are a group of people who say you gotta, because there's been historical injustices, you got to isolate the progeny of the oppressed group and educate them differently about their culture than everyone else. And they have to have an orientation towards history from their own perspective so they can develop their own values. So that's exclusive multiculturalism versus the concept of inclusive multiculturalism, which basically asserts that we listen to each other and we all learn about each other's culture. We all learn from each other. Now, the problem with exclusive multiculturalism is that it may lead to new forms of segregation and compartmentalization and partitioning, right? And it's hard to actually, have exclusive multicultural curricula when, you got people who are mixed. Like, what does a mixed person do? They study some white stuff or the black stuff. Like, how do you choose? And then not only that, also the problem with inclusive multiculturalism is that, like, how do you learn everything about every culture? And then who's teaching it? And are they being true to the way it ought to be taught? So those are some of the problems, okay? But ultimately what I wanted to do was to outline ethics to begin with. I haven't even scratched the surface, but at least we started off. We found out that there are 4 approaches. The first is comprised of 3 parts: moral skepticism, moral nihilism, and moral subjectivism. To me, it's lousy. You can't solve any more problems that way. The second is ethical relativism, which basically is a policy of non-interference. It's a normative theory that says that you shouldn't interfere with other people and their value systems because they have their own culture. It's unjust for you to interfere with it. Number 3, you got soft universalism, which is the viewpoint that we all share, principally because we're all physically comprised or made up in the same way, that our morality comes from a common source and we share values in common and we can grow upon that. And then you have hard universalism, and I haven't even gotten into that yet. So we just started. Now, I already know this is not going to be popular, man, because it requires you to think about things you haven't thought of before. But But at least you know the approaches now. If you got any questions about anything, you can ask me now. And I can get ready to get up out of here, man, and go do what else I got to do. So if you got any questions, feel free to ask me now, or else I'm about to bizounce. But this is common. This is in any ethics course. This is what you're gonna get, man. Real talk. This is what you're gonna get. Nothing any different. So if there's anything you didn't understand or anything you got twisted or confused, I can answer that question right now. So yeah, the problem with multicultural education is that, like, well, is it going to be exclusive or inclusive? And if it's exclusive, who's going to fund it? If it's inclusive, how are you going to decide what you're going to include and what, because you can't include everything. How are you going to determine what the bulk of the messaging is going to be? How do you do it? But people act like this stuff is complex, man. This is not complex at all. This is all very simple. It's simple. We haven't even gotten into anything complex yet. But I want to continue it. If you want me to continue it, I will. If you don't think it's worth anything, I think you could benefit and profit from it. But if you don't want me to do it anymore, I'm not going to do it anymore. Louis Cyber says, what do you say about Ayn Rand? Well, I got some viewpoints on Ayn Rand, but it's in the context of a larger range of thoughts. Because I would consider to be, and thank you, Bob Brown, for your contribution. I appreciate that. And look, let me just be honest about this, man. Like, if you were to take a course like this at a school, man, like, it would cost you some bucks, man. Real talk. I'm keeping it 100, man. But I know a lot of guys are not going to be into it because I ain't just going off and calling them black women bitches and shit. Fuck these hoes. These bitches ain't shit, nigga. Fuck these hoes. Like, that, guys love that here, man. Like, I mean, that's what they want to hear, man. That's what the guys come here for, man. Like, they come here for scolding and coaching and shit like that. Or they come here to hear, they get shots of dopamine from hearing guys speak derisively about women or whatever the case may be. And I'm good with that, but like, come on, man, we got to graduate and do something, more principled as far as I'm concerned. But maybe that's where we want to be at. Motherfuckers want to issue pimp slapping and shit like that. Louis Cypher says, do I have a PayPal? I most assuredly do. I also got a Cash App. $ G with a PhD. I keep forgetting, man, that my stuff is not on because I like to talk about women too, and especially policies and things that work to the detriment of men's lives. But I'm not a one-trick pony, man. I like to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, man. I don't like to be insulated to talking about one issue, because then what group of men actually accomplish anything by just focusing on one thing? And it's all centered around women. You got to be like, fuck them, man, and do you. I mean, I'm just keeping it 100, man. I ain't trying to be ignorant or nothing. I'm just saying, like, it's like motherfuckers want these women to fail or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want them to fail. I just want them to get them to understand that they're human beings and that they're fucking fallible just like we are. And stop fucking riding our coattails and dismissing us and engaging in misandrous practices. You're a human being just like I am. You ain't got to try to dog me out to build yourself up. That's what I got a problem with. But that's my moral problem. My moral problem is it's inconsistent. It's not based on or predicated on the truth fully. That's why I feel like it's problematic. Some of the things that they do. But make no mistake, if any group of people going to actually propagate themselves into the future, you got to fuck with them. You have to. Whether they be white, red, yellow, whatever. If you want some children and you want to see a copy of yourself push forward into the future, you're going to fuck with one of them. Because they got the birth canals, bruh. That's just the truth, man. Because I don't know any man that has one. What you gonna do now when they get these artificial wombs? You gonna fuck with the artificial womb? That's what you gonna do? You gonna get some artificial womb? So let me look at some of this stuff, man. He says, what do you say about our strategy for the eventual decline of Western civilization being first on the list? I don't know about that, man. I don't know what you really actually mean by that. What black men need to do is learn how to start fires and shit, man. How to hold weapons and how to purify water, how to build edifices. Like, I was talking to my father about this the other day, and we made mention of Thomas Sowell. A lot of people think I don't like the black conservatives, and to some degree, I like Thomas Sowell to some degree, but I can't agree with everything he says. But on one thing, I think he's right. Like, black people, we don't specialize in anything. We used to specialize in things, and we used to be more orientated towards developing skills. But now, man, the African American community is helter skelter. And I think the main problem, I think, and Legatus is saying is men and women got to work together. They should be working together, but the civilization that we live in, man, is too comfortable. It's too comfortable for women. Bottom line, it's so they don't know any hardships. These women don't know anything about hardship. Not at all. They don't know anything about war because we got a volunteer army. It's like we got a mercenary army. Legata says black specialize in sports. I've heard various people say that. Claude Anderson has said that, that's what we do. We entertain the world. We're the jesters of the world. And there's nothing wrong with the arts. But we do entertainment for entertainment's sake. We don't do entertainment. See, it didn't, like music, the arts didn't used to be solely or exclusively utilized. They weren't exclusively utilized for the purposes of entertainment. Like music, it initially was used in like religious rituals and cosmological rituals and rituals related to, rites of passage. You didn't have music just to listen to enjoy for leisure. No, it had a symbolic, meaning within the context of various rites and practices. But now it's become secularized. It's been made to go from the sublime to the profane. So Yeah, that's why you're getting kicked off if you use a whole bunch of caps. But any more questions, man? Yeah, I was talking to my father about this. Um, about Thomas Sowell and like what black people specialize in. And like what other ethnic groups specialize in. And we're the only group that specialize in practices that would be the first to get cut, like the things that aren't really perceived as necessary. Like we don't specialize in what's necessary. We specialize in bullshit. I mean, and one could argue that's a function of the systems in which we live, but also it's a choice. But we don't have anything to enforce, like a homogeneous culture anyway. We become anglicize our damn selves. We trying to fit in, trying to get in where we fit in. Herbert McGuinn says you're knocking it out of the park, doctor. Legata, thank you, sir. He says any like specific policy we can push for our public schools or specific programs is something that will help the majority of black people make ends meet. Man, I'm with BGS on this one, man. You got to like look at the policies that are already on the table and try to find out if any of those policies kind of coincide with your own interests. And if they do, you got to push it. Of course, says sports are really only essential for exercise. Well, they're also essential for war. And competition itself. The guy that says, how do men reclaim their power in society? Well, by, not allowing themselves to be shamed into being impotent. And by organizing. And my viewpoint on this is this is not going to happen on the left. It just ain't going to happen. The left is committed towards expanding bureaucracy and enhancing the power of the state. And the state operates in a top-down bureaucratic or a hierarchical fashion. That's just how it goes. So if you want to change in cultural policy, the only people who've been fighting against it have been people on the right. But then they don't do race very well. Yeah, they're lousy when it comes to racial issues. Just absolutely terrible. But anyway, man, I'm gonna keep going in. So tomorrow I'll come back and I'm gonna talk about Ayn Rand, because Ayn Rand is a person who I would put under the label of a psychological. No, let me take that back. She's an ethical egoist. That's what she is. And I understand it, but I think she's wrong. And I know a lot of brothers in this space who buy into like Atlas Shrugged, and they buy into the Fountainhead, and they read some Ayn Rand and they find it captivating, and I but at the end of the day, I know that social cooperation, like take for example what happens on a football field. That's how you win. Individuals doing their own thing and manning up on their own, they die. They die. I mean, I like her to some degree, but like I do understand, like you can look at human interaction on a one-shot deal, or you can look at your life in contrast to other people's lives, or you can understand larger social processes at work. And I just think that, when you start to reflect upon the ideals, like even Ayn Rand during her later years, she was looking for a motherfucking social security check, man. The very thing she decried is what she was advocating for when she was dying alone. Real talk. And that's the facts, man. They all scream this shit when they got a lot of bread or when they're coming to rise into prominence, but on the decline, they want somebody to support them. BGS, I think he's absolutely right. Human beings are group animals. Human beings are social animals. We're not, you know how you know human beings are social animals? Because they have to be socialized in order to actually function. Like, I'm going to give you the example of an animal that doesn't have to be social. A snake, a reptile. They don't have to be social. As soon as they spring from that, or spring from that egg, they're fully equipped to do what it is that they have to do on this planet all by their goddamn selves, except for to procreate. And every now and then they get together and they copulate, then they bounce. Lewis Cypher, because she didn't secure the bag from a good, but that would have worked against her principles, though. And the one thing I can say about her, anybody, man, like people talk this individualism, this individualism stuff. But at the end of the day, man, it's social interaction that upholds nations. If there's no social cooperation, society dissolves. And human beings do fight, but they spend more time cooperating than they do fighting. They spend more time cooperating and colluding. That's a negative connotation on that word. Human beings spend more time not fighting than they do fighting. So, we get a bad rap. And it was primarily the moderns who came up with this idea. Like, man is like a wolf of some kind. Like, man is like a wolf, and we're all competing with one another. We're all trying to destroy one another. The state of nature is like a state in which men are at war against each other, and it's a free for all. That might be true amongst different clans of human beings, but it's not true, of small groups, because those groups die if they don't cooperate. If there's no division of labor, if there's no cooperation in, performing duties and, protecting the group and doing something a little bit selfless, if that doesn't occur, you don't get the, you do not have, or you're not allowed to have the growth of your culture. It just doesn't happen. He says enlightened self-interest isn't opposed to collaboration. Look at how the space responded to Taz. He failed to understand that. I don't know who Taz is, so I really can't speak to him. Thank you, Duality. Yeah, BGS Ibmore says wolves have packs. Exactly. So like even wolves get a bad rap. You take a wolf and put that wolf alone in nature, and then he encounters a pack of wolves. He's gonna get torn up. He's gonna be eaten alive. Lions have the pride. He says that's more true for the Eurasians. May be the case, but hey, I wish I could talk to you in real time. I got away from StreamYard for a while. I just didn't, I'm tired of StreamYard, but yeah, lions have their prides, and yeah, it's true that Eurasians stick together. They have a different ethos though, and I think that one of the primary reasons why black folks in America have a very difficult time coming together is because we fully absorb the American ethos and the Western ethos. We bought into it lock, stock, and barrel. You need tactile and sensory contact with other human beings. You need men, especially. That's why the worst form of punishment is banishment. Did you know that? That like banishment is the worst form of punishment. Any more questions? Because I'm about to get up out of here, man. I don't know if there's any hangouts going on elsewhere, but if somebody else is doing a hangout, let me know, man. I might come on there and grace y'all with my presence. Louis Cypher says, plus we have too much genetic diversity. But you know what, Louis Cypher, we've always had a lot of genetic diversity amongst our population precisely because of the interaction with white folks that took place involuntarily. So we just don't have an ethos. We don't have one. We used to have one, but even when we had one, it wasn't our own. It wasn't something we made up. Like I like to I see you in here, I see you in here, dog. Q dog. Let me put it this way. America, to me, was the worst place for you to be a slave because of the small number of slaves that existed here in relation to the white population as a whole. And so, whereas a place like Haiti, for example, they were able to preserve a large amount of their cultural traditions. But here, there's scarcely any remains or traces of indigenous African culture and the worship of the African gods, having a cosmological orientation towards the world that's unique. But even within the context of people who have come from other cultures, after a certain period of time, they become westernized as well. Like I know a whole bunch of kids, man, that came from second, third wave of the diaspora. And man, like this one dude who's a Nigerian I know, he was born in Nigeria, but he was raised in the United States, but he lived in Chicago on the South Side. That motherfucker's a gang member, man. You look at him, he just looks like any guy on the street, man. Don't even look Nigerian, I guess. At all. So there you go, man. I'm about to go ahead and hop on Charles's page, man, to see what he popping off, see what he got going, and I'm gonna do this tomorrow. We're gonna talk about Ayn Rand and psychological egoism tomorrow. I guess the guys would be into that. I used to be a psychological egoist. I used to be on fuck you. If it ain't about me, fuck it. I used to be hardcore on that psychological egoist flavor. But then I dropped it a little bit because I started studying game theory, and I realized okay, if you can't just look at a one-shot game, you got to look at an iterated series of games, and just looking out for yourself over an iterated series of time is going to leave you out of the loop. People are going to begin to ostracize you if the only thing that you're doing is looking after yourself. If you play the game and only look at yourself and what's best for you, every time you encounter interactions with other people, you're going to begin to be labeled as a person who's operating in bad faith. And that's the problem. It's not in your interest to just be egoistic and only look out for yourself. It doesn't work for you in the long run. Now, if somebody fucks over you, then you have to some degree, look out for yourself. But like, this is why I like Aristotelian ethics. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I'll get into it at some point. But he's got a book called the Nicomachean Ethics. His son was named Nicomachus, and he wrote a book called the Nicomachean Ethics. And I think it would be definitely worth exploring, along with Stoic philosophy. But I'm not a Stoic. I like Aristotelian ethical theory more so than I do. To be perfectly honest, any other kind of ethical theory, because it's practical as opposed to just principle. But I'll get to Ayn Rand tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. But thanks, you guys, man. I'm out of here, man. I'm about to bounce out of this joint, man. I'm in the stream, no music, no nothing. I'm cutting this shit off like Russell Simmons. Thank you for coming in. God bless y'all, man. Good night. I'll holler at y'all tomorrow.